Let's begin with a look at those big banks, the ones some have called too big to fail, that some now are saying are too big to regulate. You probably heard that shocking announcement last week that JP Chase had made some risky bets and lost big time, $2 billion in the process. Stocks plunged, and investors now say this could just be the beginning, with much, much more money at risk. Over the weekend, JP CEO Jaime Dimon was on Meet the Press and responded to questioning on this and about what should be done. Take a listen.
So we've had audit, legal, risk, compliance, some of our best people looking at all of that. We know we were sloppy. We know we were stupid. We know there was bad judgment. We don't know if any of that's true yet. Of course, regulators should look at something like this. That's their job. So, we are totally open kimono with regulators, and they will come to their own conclusions. But we intend to fix it, learn from it, and be a better company when it's done.
All right, well, in some ways, what happened with JP Chase is exactly what so many have been warning about for months and even years, that without increased regulation, without those who gamble money away being held accountable, it will continue. It's a message that activists with Occupy Wall Street have been screaming from the rooftops, and in many ways no one wanted to hear. Charlie McGrath is founder of WideAwakeNews.com. He's written about many of the problems with our system. Charlie, we know what happened on the surface here. Some investors made some big gambles and lost. But let's look a little more big picture. How can something like this happen?
Well, it's very simple how something like this can happen. In the years leading up to the bailouts of 2008, 2009, you had 5 banks: JP Chase, Bank of America, Citi, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs. They were about 43% of the economy, and that's a staggeringly huge number. These 5 institutions represent 43% of the U.S. economy. Well, here we sit in 2012 after a frenzy of bailouts, a frenzy of backstopping, and a frenzy of rhetoric from our so-called representatives saying we're going to get these too big to fail institutions under control. And as we sit here tonight, Christine, this once 43% of the economy group of 5, the real gang of 5, is now 56% of the U.S. economy in 2011, over $8.5 trillion these companies, these 5 institutions make up. It's an absolute affront to any thinking American or any thinking person on this planet to think anything has been done to these too big to fails other than making them more systemic and more powerful, and truly the writers of legislation that govern not only them, but our country and our financial future.
Yeah, not exactly rocket science here. I mean, when you let these big banks get bigger, they're going to continue to make big gambles with other people's money, especially when some of the people in charge, who are making these mistakes are not being held accountable. But I'm wondering, Charlie, I mean, do you think that some people are going to finally say, here we have a clear-cut recent example. This is evidence for why these big banks need to be broken up. Do you think this will happen?
No way. No way. If we didn't see this, if we didn't see the canard of Dodd-Frank, if we didn't see the ramming down the throat of the fraudulent failure of these institutions in 2008, 2009, and continues to this very day, if we didn't see that up until this point, guess what? We're not going to see it with a $2 billion rounding error. And unfortunately, that is a rounding error for these institutions. JP Chase, I believe at this point, issues food stamp debit cards in some 30 states in this country. They don't have to worry about the $2 billion. They'll make it up in the long run. And the American people will keep being fed the same propagandist left red team, blue team garbage. And it's unfortunate, Christine, but it looks like we're just going to keep swallowing the bait until we have an uber collapse, a super collapse that will make 2008 look like a day in romper room. And then they'll stand around and say, you know what, we were doing just fine. We were doing just fine, and the sovereign debt problem is what brought the world's financial system crashing down. That way they can lay the blame on the people of the world. Sovereign debt, once it's the public's debt, they can let this whole thing come apart and then blame the people of the world and then offer us a nice solution in the form of a global financial governance.
Well, I thought it was pretty interesting. We played a small part of Jaime Dimon's interview with David Gregory on Meet the Press, and he said, which I was slightly surprised about. He said, yeah, maybe we should be regulated more. While saying this, though, I mean, this is the same CEO, the same company that organized an entire, army of lobbyists. As soon as the new financial regulation laws passed, these lobbyists came to Washington to make sure that there would be loopholes, that there would be wiggle room for these companies to continue to self-police, to continue to do what they want. So when Jaime Dimon is saying, well, maybe we should be regulated, I mean, is he just saying that to appease the masses? Do you think he really means it?
I know. I don't think, a matter of fact, it's almost insulting watching him. At least in 2008, 2009, when these fat cats, when these guys who rigged and blew up our economy, when they went to Congress, at least they had the deer in the headlight look. Now he's going on TV saying, yeah, we screwed up, but, we're going to get better. We're going to get better, and we're going to learn from this. Of course they're going to get better. They can't fail. There's a never-ending supply of money for these people because they're writing the legislation, as you just mentioned. They're sending millions upon millions of dollars worth of lobbyists to Washington, D.C. to give us regulation like Dodd-Frank. Where is Glass-Steagall? This is a simple piece of legislation, a few pages long. It makes it real simple. Jaime Dimon, you can't have an investment bank and a bank holding company. You can't take people's deposits and risk them and lose them and then expect the people to pay for it. This is the real solution. But when we have him going on, the so-called business mainstream talking about how they made a mistake, it's an insult.
Well, and you're certainly not the only one to bring up the idea of, hey, maybe we need to revisit Glass-Steagall. Some people have been writing about it. At least perhaps it will bring it back into the discussion. Unfortunately, though, probably just for a couple days. Charlie, right. JP Morgan, in some ways, being viewed here as the loser. They lost $2 billion. But who's actually losing out here?
I know that's a rhetorical question because if anybody knows that, it's you. The American people, would JP Morgan even be in business right now if we didn't leverage our financial future to rescue them? This is the question. Every time they lose money, and when we have this sovereign debt bomb explode across this planet, and we find out there's $1 quadrillion of notional value derivatives floating around the world that's going to choke this planet in debt, the people like Jaime Dimon will sit there and say, we're doing God's work, we're doing the best we can do, feel sorry for us. The people who are going to pay are the people who are paying now. The 50 million people on food stamps, the million foreclosures a year, the people who are falling off the unemployment rolls after 2 years of emergency unemployment benefits, the people who are becoming non-persons, 1.2 million of them in the month of January, coming off the participation rate. We are the ones paying for this. These people doing God's work are standing before a camera, and I think when that camera's off, they're slapping each other on the back and saying, look, we got away with yet another one. And
Charlie, you mentioned just a little bit ago that it's sort of a misnomer to think that this is a red problem versus a blue problem, that one of the two parties will come in and clean this up and save everyone. But I do want to talk with you about how you think this could play out in November. I could be wrong, and perhaps I'll hear differently in the coming weeks or months, but it seems to me both President Obama and Mitt Romney agree that new regulations, more stringent rules will hurt the banks and in turn hurt the people. I'm wondering if you think that there's any reason to be optimistic that whoever, that one of the two parties, one of the two candidates could actually fix some of these most inherent problems.
Yeah, sure. We could have a delegate race in this Republican convention coming up, and Ron Paul could become the nominee for president, and he would implement things such as Glass-Steagall and take a look at the Federal Reserve and probably eventually abolish the Federal Reserve. That would be a benefit for the people of this country and the people of the planet, for that matter. But with the mainstream's choice, the dyed-in-the-wool red team and blue team candidates that we have, we know who supports them, the financial institutions that is sending millions upon millions of dollars to Washington and millions upon millions to their campaign coffers. In 2008, the #1 private contributor or the #1 corporate contributor to Barack Obama at $900,000 was Goldman Sachs. Guess what? Same story for Mitt Romney in the year 2011. So it's a rigged game. The American people, the people of this planet, are going to be the ones that lose. So my optimism level for the 2012 election cycle, the freak show will continue, and we'll get a bought and paid for candidate a representative for special interest in the City of London and on Wall Street.
And as you know, Charlie, we've, of course, been shedding as much light on the Ron Paul campaign as possible, but he did announce today that he was going to stop campaigning in the states that haven't had yet had their primaries yet. Of course, still trying to amass those delegates. It should be interesting, but certainly an interesting story, albeit not surprising, about this J.P. Morgan deal. Charlie McGrath, founder of WideAwakeNews.com in Bozeman, Montana. Always good to have you.